Wolf and Wires, read by Guy Briggs. Chapter 1. The quarters were dim, lit only by the flicker of fluorescent strips that buzzed faintly above. Werewolf rolled out of his bed, his limbs heavy, his body still unfamiliar despite being his own. The fur on his arms bristled as he stretched, his claws scraping faint lines in the steel floor. He caught sight of himself in the mirror, and his breath hitched. Yellow eyes stared back, piercing and sharp. His snout, covered in coarse fur, twitched as he exhaled. His pointed ears flicked at the sound of dissonant machinery humming through Mastery's base. He flexed his claws, watching them catch the light. "This face," he muttered. It had been so long since he'd looked like this. His first face, the one he'd thought he'd left behind, yet here it was again. Yesterday had been chaos. The multiversal fugitive Xavier had pushed him to his limits, the battle tearing through dimensions until finally, Werewolf had ended it. But somewhere in the fight, without warning, Guy Briggs had disappeared. His body hadn't regenerated. It had reverted, shifting into his old, familiar form. Shaking his head, Werewolf grabbed his green Vans t-shirt from the chair beside his bed and tugged it on. It clung tightly to his broad chest. He pulled on a pair of faded blue jeans, then shrugged into his turquoise hoodie. He still felt heavy, his limbs too bulky, too primal. He missed the precision of his leaner Time Lord body. The door to the lab slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the green glow of Howl immediately caught his eye. The spectral overseer floated near a console, his purple robe billowing as if it caught an invisible wind. The blue mask covering his face glinted in the light, and his purple rice hat hovered above him, as immovable as ever. "Well, well," Hal said, his voice warm and resonant. "How does it feel to be back in the old body, Werewolf grunted as he walked in, running a clawed hand through his hair. "Weird, like I'm wearing a costume I grew out of a long time ago." Hal chuckled, folding his translucent arms. "You always had a flair for the dramatic, Guy Briggs. Or should I call you Werewolf now?" "Stick with Werewolf," he muttered, leaning against the console. "Guy Briggs is gone. This is what's left. Speaking of which, have you figured out what happened to me? Why have I shifted?" Hal floated closer, his eyes gleaming faintly behind the mask. "Not yet, but I have a theory. This wasn't a fluke. Time Lords don't just revert to old forms for no reason. Whatever happened during your fight with Xavier, it triggered something in you. Something tied to this face." Werewolf sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, I don't have time to figure it out. Xavier's dead. What's next?" "Ah, yes," Hal said. His voice darkened slightly. He waved a hand, summoning a holographic map of the multiverse. "Xavier may be gone, but the chaos he left behind is far from over. His death has left power vacuums in several realities, and one in particular has already been filled by someone new, someone dangerous." Werewolf's ears twitched as he stared at the map. "Who?" "Her name is Jinxie," Hal said. "A rogue technomancer. She's been using forbidden tech to destabilize entire universes, stealing their resources for her own experiments." "Experiments?" Werewolf asked, narrowing his eyes. "She's obsessed with multiversal conversions," Hal explained. "She believes the threads of universes can be rewoven into a single, unified reality. The kind of power that would take, well, let's just say it's not something we want falling into our hands. And you want me to stop her?" "Not just stop her," Hal replied. "Find her. She's a ghost slipping between dimensions, covering her tracks, but we've got a lead." Hal gestured to the map, and a small blinking red dot appeared at one of the threads. "She was spotted here, in universe R94, a collapsing reality on the edge of entropy. It's unstable, but it's a perfect hiding spot for someone like her." Werewolf frowned, his claws tapping against the console. Why would she risk going there? What's she after? Hal's voice grew grim. "There's a nexus point in R94. If she can tap into it, she can amplify her power tenfold. And if she's planning what I think she is, then she'll tear apart the multiverse." Werewolf finished, his voice low. "Exactly." Werewolf took a deep breath, his sharp teeth pressing against his lower lip. Alright, I'll find her. What's the mission plan? Insertion and retrieval, Hal said. We'll open a portal to R94 and drop you close to Nexus. Your job is to stop her before she can activate it. And if she won't come quietly, Wells smirked. I know how to handle stubborn targets. Hal's grin was faint but visible beneath his mask. I'm sure you do. Just be careful. You've never faced Jinxie before. She's not a brawler like Xavier. She'll outthink you if you're not careful. Then I won't give her the chance, Wells said, cracking his knuckles. As the holographic map flickered and the portal began to power up, Werewolf felt his instincts kicking in. He might not be Guy Bricks anymore, but this mission wasn't about his identity. It was about survival. And he wasn't going to let Jinxie rip apart the multiverse, no matter what it took. The hunt was on. Chapter 2. The portal closed behind him with a faint crackle, leaving Wells standing in the middle of a desolate street. The air smelled of rust and ozone, thick with the static charge of a universe on the brink of collapse. Broken skyscrapers jutted into the darkened sky like jagged teeth, and faint echoes of shifting metal reverberated through the emptiness. This was Universe R97, a dead world, clinging to its last threads of existence. Creepy, Wells muttered under his breath, his claws flexing instinctively. Hal's voice cackled in his ear through the comlink. You're approaching an old industrial zone up ahead. That's where we track Jinxie's signal. Be careful. She'll know you're coming. Always do, Werewolf replied, his voice low as he moved through the rubble. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a massive structure with broken windows and rusted metal walls. The closer he got, the more he could hear it, a faint voice. Lilting, melodic, echoing through the empty halls. Jinxie. Wells' ears twitched as he stepped inside, his claws clicking softly against the concrete floor. The voice grew louder, bouncing off the walls in a strange, distorted waves. It was almost hypnotic. Why did he always send someone like you? The voice teased, coming from everywhere and nowhere. A blunt instrument for delicate operation. Don't they know I'm better at this game? Yeah, well, blunt instruments get the job done, Werewolf growled, scanning the shadows. Why don't you come out and prove you're as smart as you think you are? A soft laugh echoed through the warehouse. Oh, but I already have. You just don't know it yet. Werewolf followed the sound, his sharp eyes catching faint movement ahead. He rounded a corner, his claws ready, and froze. There she was. Jinxie stood in the centre of the room, illuminated by the flicker of old machinery. Her green armour gleamed in the dim light, adorned with intricate patterns and sharp edges. A mask covered the lower half of her face, and her yellow eyes shone with a mix of confidence and mischief. Wires crawled around her like living things, sparking faintly as she pulsed with energy. Knight's outfit, Wells said, taking a cautious step forward. You always dress up for people you're about to lose to. Jinxie tilted her head, amused. Lose? Ah, darling, you don't even know what game we're playing. She took a step back, her hands moving to a nearby console. Tell me, does it bother you, being sent after someone like me when you're so limited? Limited? Wells raised an eyebrow. Lady, I'm taking out gods. You're just a thief with a few toys. Then you should have no problem stopping me, Jinxie said, pressing a button on the console. Suddenly, the room came alive. Machines roared to life, their lights blinding as they flared to life. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and a low hum filled the air. Werewolf lunged towards her, but before he could reach her, the floor beneath him crackled. Electricity surged through his body, locking his muscles in place. He snarled, trying to move, but the ground itself seemed to grab hold of him, wires snaking up his legs and arms like metal serpents. Jinxie stepped closer, her yellow eyes gleaming. Oh, poor puppy. Did you think I'd make it easy for you? You were walking into a trap the moment you entered this place. The wires called to get tighter, dragging him towards a massive circuit embedded in the wall. Werewolf growled, thrashing against the restraints, but the more he fought, the tighter they pulled. What are you doing? He snarled. Jinxie smiled beneath her mask. Part in the future. My future. She waved a hand and the wires lifted him into the air, pressing his back against the circuit. The machinery groaned as it began to pull energy from him, his body glowing faintly as his strafe was siphoned away. Your kind is so useful, Jinxie said, turning back to the console. All that primal energy, so raw and untapped. You'll make the perfect power source for my Nexus experiment. Werewolf's vision blurred as the machine drained him, his claws scraping against the metal. You won't win! Oh, I already have, Jinxie said, her voice lilting with triumph. Now sit tight, puppy. The multiverse has an appointment with destiny. As the world dimmed around him, Will growled in his throat. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Chapter 3. The machinery groaned around him, wires tightening with every passing second. Will snarled, his yellow eyes flickering as he fought against the draining pull of the circuit. His claws dug into the wires, blinding him, sparks flying as he strained against the metal restraints. You're wasting your strength, Jinxie said, her voice lilting as she worked at the console. Even if you break free, the machine's nearly got what it needs from you. Will growled low, his muscles tensing as he twisted his wrists. You talk too much. With a sharp snarl, he slashed downward, his claws slicing through the coiling wires in a single fluid motion. Sparks rained down as the severed cables recoiled, and the glow of the circuit flickered and dimmed. Jinxie spun around, her yellow eyes with wide surprise. What? But Werewolf was already moving, dropping to the ground with a thud. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his sonic screwdriver. The device gleamed in the dim light, its silver cage-like prongs retracted, the cracked porcelain hilt fitting perfectly into his clawed hand. Let's see how your toys handle this, he growled, pushing the buttons on the side. The 4 prongs at the top extended out with a sharp snap, the light at the tip glowing brightly. A high-pitched whine echoed through the room as she aimed at the console. The machines around him spluttered, gears grinding to a halt as the entire system shut down. Jinxie cursed, slamming a fist against the console as the energy siphon powered off completely. You shouldn't have done that, she hissed, turning to face him. Yeah, well, I'm not much for sitting around, Will said, tossing a sonic in the air and catching it smoothly. Now why don't you come down here and fight me like you mean it? Jinxie laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Oh, puppy. You have no idea what you've just unleashed. She leaped forward from the platform, her movements fluid and precise. Werewolf braced himself as she lunged at him, her green armour glinting in the faint light. Their crash was brutal, his claws against her reinforced gauntlets, sparks flying as metal met metal. Werewolf ducked under a sweeping strike, countering with a punch that sent Jinxie staggering back. She recovered quickly, her wiles snapping out like whips, forcing him to dodge and weave. The fight was fast and chaotic, her speed and agility matching his raw strength and instinct. You think this is enough to stop me? Werewolf growled, slamming his fist into the ground to shatter the wires curling towards him. No, Jinxie said, but this will be. She raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered. Strings of glowing ones and zeros began to form in midair, coiling and weaving together like strands of DNA. They shifted and solidified, taking the shape of a blade that glowed faintly with an eerie green light. Well's eyes narrowed as she grasped the knife, its jagged edge sparkling faintly. Cute trick, he said. You always bring math to a claw fight. Jinxie smiled beneath her mask. This ain't math, puppy. This is precision. She lunged forward, the knife aimed directly at his chest. Werewolf growled, raising his claws to block, but the glowing blade moved with impossible speed, slicing towards him in a deadly arc. Chapter 4. The jagged knife of ones and zeros shimmered its arcs towards Werewolf, its green glow casting eerie shadows on his face. He dodged it just in time, the blade grazing his turquoise hoodie and leaving a faint singe mark. Jinxie was quick, darting in for another strike, but Werewolf growled low and leapt backwards, flipping his sonic screwdriver into his hand. Nice trick, he said, aiming a sonic at the knife as it gleamed in her grasp.
Let's see if it works both ways. Before Jinxie could react, Werewolf pressed a button on the Sonic. The high-pitched whine echoed again, the screwdriver's light flaring brightly at the top. Jinxie's blade flickered, the strands of binary code twisting unnaturally as the Sonic scrambled its composition. What? No! Jinxie yelled as the glowing knife trembled, twisting in her grip. The blade reversed direction, its sharp tip now aimed straight back at her. With sudden fluid motion, the knife plunged into her abdomen. Jinxie let out a sharp gasp as he staggered backwards, clutching at the glowing wound. The binary code of the blade pulsed faintly, fading as her energy flickered. Wells strode forward, his yellow eyes as cold as he crouched down in front of her. She glared up at him, trying to push herself to her knees, but she was too weak. You need your hands to invent, don't you? He growled, grabbing the binary knife from her fading grasp. No, she whispered, panic flashing in her eyes. Wells didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he slashed downwards, severing both of her hands at the wrist. Jinxie screamed, collapsing to the ground as blood stained the warehouse floor. You should have thought about that before messing with me, Wells muttered, standing tall. Jinxie's breath grew shallow, her strength fading entirely. She slumped against the wall, her mass falling to the side as the light left her eyes. The room grew silent. Wells stared at her lifeless body for a moment. He turned his attention to her armour. Waste not, want not, he said under his breath, carefully moving the green and black suit. It was lightweight but sturdy, laced with taking it full in the stand, perfect for a field agent like him. Once he'd donned the armour, he stepped back and examined himself in the shattered reflection of a nearby console. The green armour fit snugly, sleek design complementing his already fearsome werewolf frame. Not bad, he muttered, adjusting his shoulder blades. Not bad at all. He left the warehouse with another glance at Jinxie's body, his claws clicking faintly against the armour's gauntlets. Chapter 5. Wells steps into the expanse of mastery, a formless realm outside all multiverses, held together by sheer will. The air shimmered with fragments of endless realities, constantly colliding and dissolving, as if the space itself were alive. Yet, for all its infinite possibilities, it was quiet. Too quiet. There were only 4 beings here. Hal had returned to the lab, busy modifying some otherworldly device. Traitor, their heavy-hitting, silent bruiser, was lightly meditating somewhere in the void, praying for his next vision. That left only Werewolf and King. The Nexus platform pulsed beneath Werewolf's feet as he approached its golden glow. He hadn't fully stepped onto it when King arrived, his massive purple form materialising out of the sudden rounding mist. King's 4 arms were crossed, his glowing yellow eyes narrowing as they locked onto Werewolf. His ghostly tail trailed behind him, coiling slightly in agitation. The golden markings on his torso flared briefly as he began to speak. Werewolf. King's deep voice rumbled like distant. You want to explain what you've done? Explain what? Werewolf growled, his claws clicking against the green and black armor he'd taken from Jinxie. King floated closer, his towering figure casting a faint golden glow across the platform. He gestured with his lower left arm at Werewolf's armor, his upper arms remaining crossed. Jinxie is dead. You were sent to apprehend her, not end her, and now you're wearing her tech. Explain. She wasn't coming quietly, Werewolf said simply, shrugging. Had to improvise. Improvise? King's markings glowed brighter, his voice low and cold. Cutting off her hands? Wearing her inventions like trophies? This goes beyond improvisation. This is brutality. Oh, she was dangerous, Wells said, baring his teeth. Now she's not. Mission accomplished. King's upper arms unfolded, the claws at the tips of his fingers flexing. You don't understand, do you? Mastery isn't about revenge or destruction. We maintain balance across the multiverses. This armor, he gestured again, is a tool of chaos, and you've brought it here. You've undermined everything we stand for. Werewolf's hackles rose. You sent me after a multiversal terrorist. I took her down. If you didn't want her dead, maybe don't send the guy with claws and fangs. The air between them grew heavy, charged with tension. King's glowing eyes burned brighter as he loomed over Werewolf. This isn't a game, and this isn't the first time your methods have raised questions. Keep testing me, Werewolf, and you'll find out exactly what happens to agents who cross the line! The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the shifting void around them. Finally, King turned away, his ghostly tail sweeping behind him. We'll discuss this later. For now, get out of my sight. With that, he vanished, dissolving into the golden mist, leaving Werewolf standing alone. Chapter 6. After the confrontation, Werewolf headed to the lab, Mastery's one stable space. The room was more of a organised chaos than a lab. Floating fragments of devices and glowing blueprints suspended mid-air, some drifting in and out of existence. Hal hovered near one of the workbenches, his translucent green form flickering faintly as he adjusted a piece of tech. His purple rose sways as he turns, his blue mask glowing faintly under lab's light. Back so soon? I thought King was going to tear into you for at least another hour. Oh, he did. Werewolf muttered, slumping into a chair. You know how he is. All about balance, responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Hal chuckled, floating closer. You really know how to push his buttons, don't you? Oh, someone's got to keep him on edge, Werewolf said, tapping his green armour. Speaking of which, I need a favour. Oh, no. Hal tilted his head, his voice dripping with mock concern. What now? No? Let me guess. You want me to install rocket boosters in those fancy claws of yours? Less tech, Wells said flatly, shaking his head. Summer feels too, complicated, too techy. I don't know, I just don't trust it. Hal floated in a slow circle around Werewolf, examining the armour. This is Jinx's work. It's advanced multiversal energy woven into every fibre. Stripping it down would be a waste. Yeah, but the thing is, Hal, I just don't care. Werewolf growled. The last thing I need is for this thing to start controlling me. Just make it simpler. Something I can rely on. Not something that's going to think for me. Hal sighed, drifting back to his workbench. Fine. I'll see what I can do. But don't come crying to me when it's less shiny. Yeah, shiny's not my thing, Wells said, standing. I just need it to work. As Hal tinkered with the armour, he called over his shoulder. You know, you really ought to learn some restraint, Werewolf. You're not making many friends around here. Wells smirked. Oh, there's only 4 of us. I think I'm doing fine. Maybe. But King's patience isn't infinite, Hal said. And Crater, he's too quiet. But I bet he's got thoughts about you. Oh, Crater doesn't talk, Wells said, heading for the door. Thanks for the concern. As he stepped back into the endless void of mastery, Werewolf couldn't shake the weight of King's words. But it was always another mission, another threat to hunt, and he'd deal with the consequences when the time came.